this video, I'm going to be chucking my 355,000 kilometer junkyard and eBay built Ford Ranger onto the dyno to see what sort of power it makes. So this is a 2.2 litre Ford Ranger that I've been slowly modifying over the last year and a half with modifications that I've purchased either on eBay, from wrecking yards, or I've done myself. I never planned to get this car remapped simply because of the kilometers. The motor's done 355,000, sells a gearbox and everything like that. So it's coming towards the end of its life. So I never really wanted to sort of push the motor with a remap. I wanted to leave the stock tune, do some basic bolt-ons, and just to see what sort of a difference it would make in the actual performance and the horsepower output of the car. One of the first things I modified on this car was the actual factory airbox. So I ended up removing a little restrictor that sits on the airbox itself, and I've got a video on that. I'll try to throw it up in the top right hand corner. So yeah, that was one of the first modifications I did, as well as trimming a little bit of the airbox out. The next modification that I did to this car was the actual intercooler itself. I ended up picking up an intercooler at the Wreckers. It was an aluminium one for $150. Ended up bolting that in and fitting that, and it's been really good ever since. Prior to that, I went through about 2 plastic intercoolers, so that was the reason why I ended up going with an aluminium intercooler. After that, I ended up fitting a 3-inch downpipe with exhaust, so got rid of the factory catalytic converter and the factory catback exhaust, and ended up fitting a full 3-inch off the turbo mandrel bent, which I picked up for around $400, so it wasn't really that expensive. Fitted that up and the car sounded a lot better, and it felt like it actually breathed a lot better as well. So all up, including those two, I think it's sort of owed me about, at that mark, $650. Another modification I did not long after was I actually ended up replacing the factory turbo with a China spec billet turbo. Now, this turbo itself, I don't feel it made a difference to the actual peak power or peak torque of the car, but it did sort of help a little bit with the responsiveness of it. So I don't think that it was an actual performance modification in itself. It was just this turbo that I had on there was getting sort of towards the end of its life, and I think it was pretty much, you know, ready for a replacement. At that stage, it had done about 340,000 kilometers. So I thought, you know, why not get a eBay one with a billet wheel on it? So apparently the billet wheel helps it sort of spool up a little bit better. While I was there, I also fitted some steel intercooler piping that I picked up on eBay as well. That's not really a performance mod. That was just more so just to help with not blowing intercooler pipes. Also, another mod that I did was I ported out the factory exhaust manifold. I did a video on that recently where I ported that out and made it bigger. I felt that was a pretty worthwhile mod, and yeah, that was a lot of sort of labor intensive because you got to pull the turbo off and port it out and then refit the turbo. But all in all, it probably took me, I don't know, a couple of hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours to do. And besides that, that's the only real sort of performance modifications that I've done. So if we look at it from a financial perspective, I've probably only got about $650 worth of actual performance mods in the car. The rest are just sort of bulletproofing, you know, which is stuff like this steel intercooler piping, where it's just preventative maintenance so it doesn't go wrong down the track, as well as the turbo as well. So in stock form, these 2.2 Ford Rangers make around 90 horsepower at the wheels. The 3.2 5-cylinder, in factory form, they're about 115 horsepower. From what I've seen on the internet and other dyno results that people have thrown up on YouTube and that. So first, I'm going to just throw a clip of a 2.2 litre Ford Ranger, exactly like this one, just on the dyno in stock form so you can see the power output.
Which will not make any difference, especially on the Ford 2.2 TDCi engines. This is the dyno before run. Please note power is measured on the wheels. No correction factors are used. (91 horsepower, 264 newtons on the wheels).
Next up is a video that I'm going to throw up of the 3.2 litre 5-cylinder. So these ones make a bit more, obviously bigger capacity, more cylinders. So I'm just going to throw that clip up right now.
To TDCi engines. This is the dyno before run. Please note power is measured on the wheels. No correction factors are used. (114 horsepower, 318 newtons on the wheels).
So just looking at the dyno graph here, we can see that it made 119.3 horsepower and 304 newton meters of torque. So that's quite a bit of an improvement over the stock figures that we've seen earlier. It looks like roughly about 30 horsepower more in power and around 40 newton meters of torque that it's picked up with those modifications, which is, you know, in my opinion, that's not too bad at all for a couple of simple bolt-on mods. So we're making about 5 horsepower more than a standard 3.2 5-cylinder Ford Ranger, and looking like we're making probably about 20 newton meters less torque than a 3.2 5-cylinder, which in my opinion is still pretty good. We've got to remember we are running a factory Ford tune here, and the car has done 355,000 kilometers, so the motor is well worn if we look at it from that perspective.